You've made it. The world is quiet now, and it's just us. Welcome to the TheSavonExperience Pillow Talk Solo Edition, your safe space to reflect, exhale, and get real. I'm your host, Savon, and tonight we're diving deep. So get comfortable, take a breath, and let's talk.
That's what pillow talk is. Every week I'm pulling up with the real solo. No guests, no edits, just you, me, and the truth. So go ahead, get comfortable. You're tuned in into the Savon Experience. Pillow talk, solo edition. Let's talk.
Welcome. Listen, if you saw that, you saw me spill it all over myself. Trying to be cute. Spilled it all over myself. I did. Trying to be cute, girl. Trying to be cute. So listen, what is going on? This is episode 11 of the Savon Experience, honey, Pillow Talk podcast. Well, I still fuck up words. I do. Still fuck up words. And this week, we're going to jump right into it because today and this week, I want to talk about labels. Okay? And I'm not talking about the purses. I'm not talking about luggage. I'm not talking about designer bags. Not today. But we are talking about labels, the history and the power of pronouns. Okay? Are y'all ready for this conversation? I'll tell you, I was definitely inspired to have this conversation looking at Angelica Ross and T.S. Madison's conversation amongst themselves, right? Because there's been a lot of discussions around pronouns, and I think that both did a very good job with explaining themselves and providing us like the historical artifacts, the ingredients that go into really talking about their experiences and why they feel the way that they feel. And I thought it was a very emotionally intelligent, graceful, and very forward conversation. I really do. And I was glad to see it, glad to hear it, glad to witness it, all those things. So, this was something I wanted to talk about anyway. But one of the things that really made me want to just dive into it now versus later is because I loved the way both handled the question. I loved the way both handled the responses, and I loved how both shined light on each other's experiences, the key differences of those experiences, and then how they matter in the way we show up today, right? It's a generational thing, and happy to see it, right? I learned a couple things about myself too, because Angelica had stated that as she walked into her transition, as she walked into her discovery of self, like the different phases that she went through of identification. Maddie talked about the different phases or points that she went through with her identification. And I probably should say they for Angelica because I'm not real sure. But I liked the way they broke down the actual, their walk and their history. And I sat as I listened and I thought about, I think that Angelica is on something as it relates to me. Because definitely where I sit today in my thought, as far as my identity, it's definitely she, hers. But there are moments where I'm like, I think I kind of straddle the fence or the line a little bit with being more gender conforming, non-binary. Because later in my walk, meaning like right now in my walk, there are days I'm like, girl, I'm not finna, me and Beard, and y'all have heard me say it, me and Beard, we gonna be outside. We are. Good morning from me and Beard, right? There was days that I wouldn't dare show up outside in the world without my hair done, without some hair on, without a little paint on the barn. I wouldn't do any of that. None of it. But today, as I sit into my peace and I sit into my I'm going to say, what's the right word that I want to use? As I sit into my courage is not really confidence, right? I'm comfortable in my skin, cozy. Okay, comfortable in my skin. I'm okay with whichever version of me that shows up. But I want to dial it back just a little bit because I want to give you just a tad bit of history for those who don't know. And this is going to be for more, I'm going to say the millennials, Gen Alpha, that generation of people coming up, right? You know, one thing that we need to remember as I walk into diving into this topic layered with history, evolution, emotions, right? Pronouns and identity in the LGBTQ plus community, the legitimate cause, it has grown legs, if you will, from the roots of resistance to the rise to where we are today, the new affirming language. We're going to have to, in this discussion, explore where we came from, because I think that's exactly what Maddie went, she was talking about where she came from. And I can identify with her history and where she came from, because I had the same experiences, where we are now and why it all matters, right? So let's go back. For generations, the Legitimaquas, that's what I call them, the LGBTQ, I call us Legitimaquas. And I'll let us sometimes grow up like I'm not doing it. And that's not because I don't care. But for the Legitimaquas community, plus folk, we really didn't have a public language to really express our identity safely. It just wasn't. Every reference that I heard as a kid, it was a derogatory term. Today, it didn't bother us then. But pronouns were often assigned, without consent. You probably wonder, like, how can you consent to that? Well, it was either the two, male or female, without care. The binary rule, the binary rules everything, right? But even in the shadows, it's something that Angelica stated in her points when she was speaking that really kind of shed some life. Like, even in the shadows, our people have always existed, right? You've always had non-binary. You've always had more gender fluid. You've had those that kind of straddle the line. I think Prince was like one of the first that we see on a global scale that kind of like, didn't really conform either or, but we accepted it, right? It was more than just the two spirits, male, female, that we were, accustomed to, and I'm a 1900s baby, honey. So, 49 this year, 48 currently. So gender non-conforming and beyond was not something that we really heard of. It wasn't something that was expressed, right? This weekend, this is so weird, this conversation even came up. This weekend, when I was working in the salon with my village, with, my clients and, the women of influence in my life, they were just actually having a conversation about what it was like when they grew up and how, coming, if they were getting ready to go see a show or go shopping or to go get something to eat, it was just like, the way they presented themselves in public, right? It was very feminine. It was very, we only wear dresses. I think during that time they were talking about the gloves. They would have their gloves on. Come on, let me get you back. See, because I did too much. Gloves. They wore gloves and hats and dresses. They were like, we had our dresses on, they actually stated that during that time, women didn't really wear pants. So this was probably, I think these ladies are in the like 70s, maybe close to 80, right? Wearing pants wasn't a thing. Like, women didn't wear pants. That was considered masculine. And we know today's day that it's not necessarily masculine because you're wearing pants. You know what I'm saying? Even though they had the term, well, who wear the pants in the family, it can be emasculating depending on who you're referring it to. But when you think about masculinity and you think about femininity, there was a view, there was a visuals that you had. It was the softness. Maddie had talked about how, girl, if you want to give woman, honey, you can't be walking out there with that 5 o'clock shadow. You have to shave before you hit the streets. And, that's kind of how I was raised too. And there was a time when I was first going through my discovery, graduating from high school, right? It was the Black Jesus moment, is what I call it, because, I have the long hair, and you got the beard, and you got all of that, right? So you're just you're trying to figure yourself out. At least I was trying to figure myself out. So there was that area, that gray area. And I'll pause there because when I say gray area, I don't think people realize how many gray areas there are in life, period. When it comes down to gender fluidity, when it comes down to sexuality, when it comes down to thoughts, when it comes down to likes, when it comes down to relationships, what you think a relationship is, there are always gray areas. So I really struggle with everyone trying to keep everything so black and white, because it's not. Life is not black and white. It's just not. Sure, we have tried our best to have some sort of conformity, to try to have some sort of civilization where we identify things strictly as, to have, I guess, some order to make people feel more comfortable. I'm not a historian in that area, so I can't say that. But what I can say is, what I've learned in life is that nothing is black or white. It is a gray area. It's different. It's a mixture of it all. And we've seen that play over and over throughout history. We've seen it play over and over throughout the animal kingdom. It's not just humans. It's not just the Homo sapiens. You know what I'm saying? So when we think about generations back, the people who did the work, who went through the struggle so that we can have some of the rights that we're comfortable with now. We can walk outside and expect people to call us by our chosen identity and use the pronoun that we associate with, right? We have that liberty today because of all the adversities and people with different experiences coming for and fighting for that right. So I do understand the importance of not nullifying someone's existence and their identity, but I also feel like that we have to also find some common ground here when people are doing their best. And I know that may not be a very popular response, especially within the LGBTQ community. They feel like we've had to just take and accept everything for so long. I do understand that. I have too. But when you see progression, and when you see people actually trying, and when you see them putting in the work, and through their actions that it's not, they're not being a villain, it's coming from a good place, it's not coming from this passive aggressive space, then that's when you begin to understand that there is change, there is a movement that's happening in that moment. And I think so many people hold on to old things, old shit. It amazes me. So let me just bring it back real fast so we can just stay on track with my topics, right? So if we go back generations, LGBTQ folk didn't really have a language to really express our identities. It just wasn't there. And I do understand that pronouns, it's power, right? It's confidence. It's affirmation. It's respect, right? It's not just a word. Pronoun is not just a word. It's recognition and it's truth. So I do understand using someone's correct pronoun isn't about just a trend. It's not about an agenda. It's not about, doing what everybody's doing right now. It's about respect, right? Pronouns affirm that we see people how they wish to be seen, not how society chooses to label them. Here's another thing that I don't understand, why it's so different for people to do this. And I'm saying people in a loose term because I'm going to dive into some of the things that do make it difficult. I want to touch on that, but I do want to say this, want to give this reference really quick. Being raised in the church and being raised deeply rooted in the church from a child all the way up to today. And I had it on both sides of the family. My dad's side of the family, you've got a bishop and you've got evangelists. And on my mother's side, you've got evangelists, and then you've got, like, my grandmother was an evangelist. So I had it on both sides of the family. Deeply rooted traditions that linked to religion. And so everything we did was surrounded around generations of people and things. And I'm going to say generations of acts, coded generational acts, things that we did that was passed on from the previous generation, right? Ideals, thoughts, the way we moved was passed on from our forefathers, right? Our ancestors. So the construct that was put in there, you had this extremely hyper masculine and reference as to what man was, and hyper feminine as what was related to what woman was. And if you were to play in any of those lanes, you had to play exceedingly well into those lanes. So it wasn't, you didn't have the option of being able to jump rope in and out. Like, you couldn't do that. Pick a lane, choose one. And then still, it wasn't the terms that we have today. We had other terms that kind of end with agate and sissy and punk, and you got a little sugar in your tank, sweet, all those references, but nothing that would say her, hers, hers, none of that, or they, them, or she. It just wasn't there. So I do understand exactly what Maddie says about how we were brought up and what we idealized as a woman, as feminine, based off of the visions that we. And also, she said it perfectly when she said, hey, if you were claiming she and you he, born he, and you walked out that house not giving she, and people could see that you was he, baby, you was getting your ass beat. Period. This is just what happened. This is not promoting violence or any of that. This is just what happened. These are our realities. And I do understand that that may not be what's happening on a greater scale today, but we don't want to invalidate the history, her experiences. So, we were told, baby, if you wanted to be authenticated, if you wanted to be taken seriously, if you wanted to be referenced as, you're going to have to look as. And that's just the way that it was, period, from our time, period. And she's said that at nauseum, okay? I don't know how many ways that she can say that, right? And I also see how she's learned from that, as well as I, and we're learning how to blend the new languages and references we have that really identify us, and not as a monolith, but as a spectrum, right? And so that takes work. And she's doing the work. A lot of people are doing the work, but I think people always try to find something that they can pick apart because they're just miserable as fuck. And that may seem like a general statement, but that's just how I feel about it. So when it comes down to that, we have to also remember that there was a shift that happened, obviously, because we're in a different place today. Just like the shifts happen when you progress in life. What I was going to, before I want to make sure I get this comment out before I move past this. In the church, I was talking about the church and being deeply rooted into the church. There's a lot of statements that are stated as far as affirming affirmations, right, on where we want to be. It may not be our reality today, but it's who we are. How many times have you been in church and your minister says, speak it as though it is? Speak it as though it is. So you talk about people who are starving and barely pay their bills, and they talk about how I'm rich. God's got me. He's going to break hold of this, and I have it right now because I'm speaking it into existence. How is it any different? You want to call us delusional if we say she, her, hers, and we're presenting that, and that's how we feel, but biologically we weren't born that, right? We're delusional. Well, aren't you delusional then if you're in church talking about, well, God is going to do this and I'm rich? I'm debt free, and you sitting up on $400,000 worth of debt, barely can pay your bills. I mean, are we like, what we gonna let? I'm just saying, when does it begin to like, when do you call bullshit bullshit? Like, I'm just saying, if we're being consistent, or are we going to live in that gray area and understand and actually um, acknowledge that there is a gray area, right? So if you feel that way, that may be work getting you to looking that way, right? So people don't make you delusional. So when you walk around here, you rich and you this and God's got it and your debts are paid and checks and income in the mail, unexpected finances and blah, blah, blah. But I see you broke down and struggling. Am I supposed to think you're delusional, or I'm saying, do you have faith and you're speaking into existence? You're speaking positivity. See, the last episode we talked about delusions. We talked about it. Is it protecting you? Is it like what? It's a fine line. It's a very fine line. So when we're in a space and someone has identified themselves to say, hey, my pronouns are, and they're leading with that to make sure that you are aware. I don't think it's hard to say they, them, her, hers. It's not hard to do that at all. And I don't think I think if people could do it more, they would do it. But here's the point that I want to make. And I'm only going to make this point as it relates to some people, not all people, because then I want to go back to what Angelica said in her her response when she referenced her mom. There are some people when they say, "Hey, I don't want to smoke. I'm not trying to cause any beef. What is your name?" And there are so many people that are butthurt by someone identifying you by your name, whether it's the name, and oftentimes it is the name that you've chosen to move forward with if you're changing your name. So if you've gone from Jerry to Terry, or from Terry to Jerry, or baby, you suddenly Susan, and they're referencing you or referring to you as Susan. They may not say she, they may not say her, but they say, this is what Susan wants. Susan, tell me more about your experiences. And I love to hear Susan speak. Susan is so well articulated. Susan is this, Susan is that. Why would you get upset that they're calling you by your name? And why would you automatically think that they're not calling you her, hers, because they have some type of thought about it? There are some people who's been very transparent about it, and I'm not talking about those. So stay focused, right? How do you know it's not someone who's just trying to make sure they don't muck up something? There are people who meet hundreds, if not thousands of people on a regular basis. And I don't know about you, but I don't meet thousands of people on a regular basis, and I struggle with names. I struggle with a lot of things because it's a lot to keep up with, right? So if I can struggle with something so simplistic, how can we not acknowledge that someone could be struggling with, okay, so I remember I met this person 3 months ago or 3 years ago. What did they say their pronouns were? But you remember the name is Terry or Susan now, and you refer to them as such. It's not always that they're doing that to try to be funny, but I think we're so used to this passive aggressive personality and passive aggressive attitude that's in the LGBTQ community, because let's be very clear, we have a lot of passive aggressive antics and culture within the LGBTQ community. It's always deeply rooted in reading and trying to be cute, little snippy comebacks, little things like this, so I can understand why the energy and the spirit may be there, because we kind of created that a little bit. But you have to know the reason behind it. And if you don't know the person, you can't say what their reason is. You can't. So they had a little conversation, and you guys can go back and look at that, because my point of this podcast is not really to recap all of their information, because I wanted to talk about this particular stuff. That's why you don't see it in the actual name, because I'm not trying to use anybody's name to get views, right? We're not doing that. The point is still the point, though, right? So there are some people, and there were points made that said, hey, I don't think this person meant it this way, And so, a matter of fact, I know they didn't mean it that way. But if you don't know them, you may not know that, right? But then there are some instances if you know the person. So, for instance, I think Angelica said, "Hey, my mom would never use the pronouns that identify with they, them, or her, hers. She's just not. But she has gotten to a point to where she'll call me by my name, Angelica, right? So she's like, and so she was like, that wasn't enough for me because I know that she said to me that she would never see me as that. So, boom. But isn't there still growth in the fact that she is at least using your now current name? Not trying to give anybody a pass, not saying that growth cannot continue on, but there is growth, right? That is growth. And you've got to be able to find a middle ground somewhere. You've got to be able to find common ground somewhere where everyone is comfortable, not just yourself, right? Not just them, not just me. Like we're all comfortable in some type of way. We can be respectful because that's what it's about. It's about respect. So in that moment, I felt like, with the exception of her mom, that's personal, right? So I have none of my thoughts is to attack any one of the individuals. I'm just saying, as we continue to talk on my channel about grace and emotional intelligence, this is the type of work that you do. These are the type of discussions that you have. And as we continue to shift and progress as a race, as people, just like technology continues to advance, we should be able to advance. If you telling me that everything in your career, in work, in your religion can advance, but you can't in this space, that seems more like resistance. It may be small changes because there are times when we get to a certain age, we just ain't gonna learn nothing new. They say you can't teach your old dog new tricks. Well, that might be the case. I don't know, but what we've got to I ain't trying to go there. We've got to remember that as we shift into more identity options and as they expand, they, them, z, them, she, they, he, they, neo pronouns. That was a new one that I learned. Look at me learning something. Today's generation is doing a great job. We're carving out space for identity beyond the binary, but not beyond he and she. And I do understand how that can be confusing because it was confusing for me within the community. It's still challenging for me within the community because I struggle sometimes with the fact that how do I know what pronouns you want to be called if I can't visually see the representation, right? And although it's bigger than that, right? If I know you, then I know what they are and I have no problem using them, right? But if I don't know you and your name tag says Jerry, Sherry, Susan, suddenly Susan, whatever case may be, I'm gonna call you by your name. And just because I've had a conversation that's telling you that I do have struggles with trying to remember that, you might be mad at me because I was open about I have struggles with that, right? Not from a disrespectful perspective, but I just have struggles with it. Well, it's she, he. Okay, Jerry, girl, honey, like I don't know you. I don't know you. And some of these people be in the comments. Now, I talked about comments. Sometimes y'all say shit just to get a reaction out of people because you are mentally and emotionally unintelligent. You know what I'm saying? And it is what it is. Because when you start arguing with people that they didn't have nothing to do, they don't even know you, first of all. So how could it be about you? And I will say this one thing to Maddie in the event that she ever sees this video, or Angelica. I'm not doing it on purpose, like Angelica. Both of you all did a great job. And it comes to a point to where you can't continue to apologize and explain your way through things. You are showing up, you're being present, and you're doing the work. You're being open about your challenges, and a lot of people not open about it because they know it'll be subjected to ridicule and criticism. And as public figures, non-public figures don't get it. We don't get it. I'm not as big of a public figure as either of the two, so I still may not be getting it. But I do know that I am emotionally intelligent enough to know that they run across thousands of people on a regular basis. And it is very challenging to remember every detail about somebody. And sometimes they do a great job doing that, and that is exceptional to them. But here's one thing that a lot of people have got to realize, and I've said this in my previous episodes too. You're not a celebrity. You don't know what celebrity people go through. You're not getting judged at a greater scale. You're only judged at the singular lens that's focused upon your life. Nobody's following you. You're not posting everything about your life. So therefore, we don't have access to that information to ridicule you. I said on one video, and I'll say it again, show me all of your years of performance reviews and feedback from your bosses and peers, etc. And then let us judge the fuck out of that and see how you feel about it. See if you would want a little grace, a little, emotional intelligence, a little understanding about it. This shows up in a lot of areas of our lives. And Maddie, you don't have to apologize for shit else. Period. Someone's going to always hate what you say because it's you. Period. They're going to hate it because they don't like you. There's nothing you can do about that, sis. Roll with those of us who do love you. Angelica stated that. Sometimes it's just a messenger, and they just don't like the messenger for whatever reasons. But quit these people trying to make up reasons, right? So I get it. And as a human, you can't say, girl, you can't think about them, and you can't respond to everybody. We're human. Somebody come at you, you coming back. It's just the way it is. But I think we need to remember that they have more access. They are touching and speaking to people, and they're more public facing than we are. So we can't begin to understand those challenges. So this is when grace should be given, right? And there are differences in everyone's, experience, especially from a generational perspective. There's a huge gap. And here's where it gets nuanced. Older generation inside and outside the LGBT plus community sometimes feel overwhelmed by the language shift. I'm one of those people that was very initially in the beginning very overwhelmed because I'm like, I don't know what to do. And what I do know is that I don't want to offend anyone intentionally. I don't want to offend you unintentionally. So how do I navigate in a space where I can show up and use the right pronouns that you prefer? If I know you, that's different. If I don't know you, how will I know? So if I don't know, I'm just going to use your name. That's all that we can do. That's all that you can ask someone to do, because no one's going to be walking through these exhaustive exercises every day trying to figure your shit out. That's a you problem. And maybe that's just the older generation in me. That's just a you problem. Okay, but sometimes that's a you problem. That ain't my motherfucking problem. It ain't the world's problem. Respect, however, we should definitely be used. We should definitely be respecting people. So we got to realize that a lot of times that hesitation is not because of hate. It may be linked to being unfamiliar. So we need to continue to hold space for learning without shame. I don't understand why these new age folks aren't that progressive. And why do my old ass have to tell you that? You're so progressive. Why do I have to say that? It should be understood. We're at 33 minutes. We got to wrap this shit up. So when confusion turns to resistance, that's a whole different thing, right? Let's be real though. Not everyone's confusion is innocent. I touched on that because of the fact we have a lot of passive aggressive tones and little comments, and people will say things, so sometimes it turns, into a situation because you know when someone being passive aggressive. And sometimes it's not always easy to read within our community because we're always trying to find a way to slay a comment, to read a bitch, to get you right on together, girl. And sometimes you don't need all that. All the theatrics, you don't need all that. And it creates an air where you have these type of issues and confusing moments. So then it turns stubbornness into dismissal, and discomfort isn't always oppression, okay? Learning isn't violence. We can't grow if we stay rooted in what we've always done. So when I see these two trying to do the work to understand and to learn, they're doing more work than most people in the comments who ain't doing shit but just judging. the whole fucking time. Girl, please. You are exactly doing the same shit that you are talking about, and you're trying to comment and trying to convince others that someone else is doing. And it's often the same people that treat other people in the community like shit. So you want all these other people outside the community to treat you like royalty and treat you respectful, but then you can't even treat your own sister or brethren in the community with respect. Especially if they go by she, her, hers, and they don't present as that. Like what's the term that they say? They're not as passable, or they're more clocky. We don't do a good job in our own community with encouraging the girls who are, bitch, I'm clocky. Fuck you mean? But you still couldn't tell me I ain't the shit, and I don't give a damn how many times a picture show up, bitch, and I got a little 5 o'clock fuzz there. This is where the new me, and this is where I learned about myself, was listening to Angelica about how, listen, I might actually be more non-binary than I thought. Because I love to buck the system, girl. I love to push an envelope. You can't put me in a box. I'm not boxable. You understand? So that is something now that I'm trying to learn, right? So we have to remember our role of empathy. This is where grace meets accountability. Accountability. What was that, girl? What was that, girl? Accountability. We educate without shaming. We correct without condemning. And we stand firm in our truth while recognizing everyone is on a journey. And everyone's journey is different. Where they start and where they begin is different depending on their experiences. So before you instantly say that someone's trying to do something shady to you or they're trying to disrespect you, you should really take yourself out of your little box for a second and probably understand to get more information and see what it is. Hell, it's hard for me, and I'm in the LGBTQ community. The straights, girl, I have no idea. And when I said the straights, like it was like some type of condition that was really fucked up. See, shit like that, that could have came off real fucked up. I didn't mean it as fucked up, but somebody could have took it that way. The straights. The straights. That's a real fucked up way to... Girl, let me stop. So we've got to realize that language is a living thing, right? It is always evolving. It is always changing. And so why wouldn't gender expression follow the same trend of evolving languages and technology and forward thinking? Like, why would we stay stalemate? Why would we still stay like in 1922 there? And we're not living in a 1922 type of a world or environment. This is why I have a lot of issues with Congress and all the shit they're trying to do right now. But that's a whole other conversation. Because they want to go back to a time yet being so progressive. Girl, bye. So language has evolved. I'm going to repeat it again. So why wouldn't gender expressions follow? From Negro to Black, from homosexual to queer, words change. And those changes are often signs of liberation. So, what are your pronouns? Which ones do you use and why? Ask yourself that. And have you ever felt unseen because someone refused to honor your identity? Has anyone ever gone to school and gotten their associates, their bachelors, their masters, and their PhD? And someone refused to refer to you as Dr. So-and-so, so-and-so? I don't care if you got your PhD in coloring books. I don't care if you got your PhD in English. I don't care if you got your PhD in making hot sauce, Dr. Hot Sauce, okay? You got your PhD. You paid for it and you did the work. But a lot of people don't even want to recognize your achievements. So it's out of the same spirit sometimes. That's when it's vile. When they see you've done the work, they see you've gone through the task, you've gone through school, you've got your doctorate, you are a doctor. You were a lawyer, and then you worked your way to being a judge. You are a judge. You're no longer just Esquire. You are Judge so-and-so, so-and-so. And I don't find a lot of families refusing to call their kinfolk, judge so and so, doctor so and so, president, vice president, CEO of so and so, and you probably had that title a whole lot less of a time than you had your original title, right? So it's not hard when they're proud of it. It's not hard at all. As long as it gives them bragging rights, it's not hard. And you can say, "Oh, don't call me doctor. Just I'm still so and so, so and so. I'm still Savon. You ain't gotta call me Doctor Osborne. Just Savon. No, you doctor. You work for that. So if I worked for this look, why can't you?" This is where it gets tricky, and this is when you gotta start doing the work to kind of unpack that and see exactly what that angle is. Are they being cute? They trying to be they? What, girl? What you trying to do? You know. So we've got to keep that in mind, right? So, what are your pronouns? And then, are there generational gaps in your family or community that needs healing? We talk about breaking generational curses. This is a type of generational curse, too, the refusal to grow. Pronouns isn't just grammar, it's your presence. That's why it's important. If you've ever not understood why someone's pronoun is important to them, it's because it's their presence. Just like you want to feel validated. Don't matter if people understand it. It don't matter if you get it. If you want to be called a duck, I'm going to call you duck. Okay? If that's what you want, that makes you feel better. We've done a lot worse. So, we've unpacked how pronouns have evolved, why they matter, and how to navigate generational gaps with both grace, truth, emotional intelligence. We're understanding that this is about language, legacy, and love. So with this episode, conversation should be a tad bit different. Everyone's having the conversation. And if you find yourself still standing 10 toes in wherever you were, then that's fine. That's you. Understand that disrespect come back around. So when you get married and you want to be called Mr. and Mrs. somebody else, and I'll be like, bitch, no. You Mr. your single name, your maiden name. Don't get mad. Don't get mad. Because it's the same thing. You just got that name, girl. You just got married. That's all. Oh, I'm Mrs. So and so, so and so. Okay, girl. Dad better not ever call you Miss and you a Mrs. Girl, I'm Mrs. Ooh, how the fuck I know that? Because people wear rings all day long. They don't mean shit. I wore a decoy forever. Huh? Okay. Speak truth. So you guys have a very grounded day, evening, and hold space for identity, evolution, and truth. And until next time, stay grounded, stay soft, stay Savon. All right, y'all. Have a good Thank you for sharing this moment with me. Remember, grace isn't just for others, it's for you too. Until next time, this has been the Savon Experience Pillow Talk Solo Edition. Be kind, be soft, be you.
No mask, no noise, just my truth in the dark. Laid back whispers straight from the heart. Let the world now come and walk this walk. You're deep inside the Savon Experience Pillow Talk.